Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Tzadi Aleph. We begin on the bottom line of Tzadi Mabez, where we're in the middle of a conversation that we started, where we're talking about the halacha of Hachosim Esapara. That's related to the theme of our previous Mishnah regarding Hasoches Apayilim, that there's an obligation to let him eat Minat Torah, which is the equivalent of what's by an ox, but of Lisachsim Shabbatishay. Then the Gemara had a conversation regarding that Isser and also that of leading animals. Prohibited mixture of different animals, if that would be violated b'koil. If, let's say, you muzzled the animal by screaming at it, would that be considered a lab sheyesh by maisa, and if you get malchus, because akimis vasayim have a maisa by turning your lips, or would we say that's not? And the Gemara continues trying to bring a raya in regards to that machlikas. Throughout the entire world. So I'm discussing today's daf our chesem esapara. This, if someone muzzles the cow, is he loike umeshalim? Does he get lashes and have to pay a monetary payment? Loloshes isa b'chalav, regarding are you allowed to knead a dough with milk? Kalayim, the prohibited mixture of mating animals. There's a few types of kalayim. One is leading animals together. One is putting wool and linen together. Another one is mating different types of species together. Regarding this halacha of somebody working, an animal working, that we have to go ahead and let them eat, what happens if he does it only with his hands, or only with his feet, or only with his shoulders? Would that also be included in this halacha? The halacha of teinav anavim, which is if you're working with figs and grapes, are you allowed to work with one and eat from another one? Geffen v'geffen, are you allowed to work in one grapevine and eat the grapes of a different grapevine? So we continue, Daf Tzadi Mabez, the last line, we were first finishing up the conversation that we had Machlikas Rabbi and Rish Lakish regarding if Hachosim Esapara or has Mazavik B'Klayim, and he does it B'Koil, what's the halacha? Rabbi said you're chayiv because moving of the lips is an action, and therefore you get lashes. Rish Lakish said you're pater because voice is not an action. On that is Rabbi and Rish Lakish. Rabbi has Rish Lakish from the Mishnah Mesechtes Tamura. It's a continuing type of Tzadi Aleph from Amid Aleph. The Reisha of that Mishnah was saying Hakol Mamirin. Everyone could make Tamura, which is that of transferring the sanctity of the animal to a chulin animal, that's whether it be men or whether it be women, which the Mishnah explains. This that was saying everyone does tamura. It's not that you're allowed to do tamura. Actually, the Torah actually tells you explicitly that you're not allowed to make a tamura. You're not allowed to even attempt to transfer the sanctity of the carbon to another animal. What it rather means to say is that if anybody, the man or the woman, does tamura, mumur, they have the power to create a sanctity after the fact of tamura. And for Savikis Arbam, whoever does it is going to get lashes because the Torah says, lo yech lefenu. You shouldn't swap the carbon to another animal. Now, over here, where it's just words and you're getting lashes, obviously, says Rabbi Yechanan, the moving of the lips that a person moves when he talks is an action, and that's why he gets lashes. That's not like Rish Lakish, who said that when you say something, that's not considered an action to get lashes. Amalei said to him, Homani, now who's the Tana of this Mishnah? It's Rabbi Huda. It's Rabbi Huda, the Amar that he says, Lav Shem B'Maisa Loikin Alav, that when you have a negative prohibition that has no action with it, you still get lashes, which many places, the Gemara brings this opinion of Rabbi Huda, Marcus Abdal Mabez, where it says, you're not allowed to leave over from come to Pesach till the morning. And then the pasuk says, whatever you leave over till the morning, you burn it in the fire. What's the pasuk coming to tell you? It's giving you a positive commandment, which is if you violated the loisaseh, to be masakin that by burning it. To tell you that you're not going to get lashes, which is what's called nitig laseh. You could remedy it with a positive commandment. Now, the reason is because the pasuk is coming with a remedy. If not, the one who would leave it overnight would get lashes, even though there's no maisa. You don't do action. It's a passivity. And still, Rabbi Yehuda says, you see from there that obviously lav shem b'maisa, like in the love. So that's the reason why the Mishnah in Tamura is saying this idea. But it's not difficult under Rish Lakish. It's because, yes, no, there is no maisa. Rabbi Yehuda holds, even though there's no maisa, you get lashes. Says Gemara, could you really say the Mishnah in Tamura is like Rabbi Yehuda? But the Reisha said, everyone could violate the halacha of Tamura. Either one of them will create this entity of Tamura. But we asked on the wording of the Mishnah, Hakol Lasuyim, when say everyone, what's Hakol? It's an inclusionary terminology. And that says that we said it's Lasuya Yerush. That if, let's say, an inheritor does Tamura on the carbon of his father after his father passed away, it's going to create a Tamura. Now, that's with the like Rabbi Yehuda. So you cannot say that Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. Because the Ikar Rabbi Yehuda, he says clearly, Yerush ain't a Meimer, and if he does Tamura, it does not create a Tamura. As the Gemara explains in Tamura in the beginning of the first paragraph within the Bezim and Aleph. And he holds Yerush in the Semech. He holds also Yerush not only cannot do Tamura, it doesn't do Smicha, doesn't lean on the carbon. So how could you say it's Rabbi Yehuda to answer the question on Rosh Hashanah? Says the Gemara, you're right, it's not Rabbi Yehuda per se. High Tana, the Tana of the Mishnah, Tamura, Savala Kebasei Bechada, Upal Gile Bechada. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda in one area, in the fact of that Lav Shem Emaisa like in love. But he does not hold like Rabbi Yehuda in regards to the halacha of Yerush not being able to be made. He holds that Yerush could do Tamura. That concludes the Gemara's discussion regarding the Machlekes of Yechon and Shlakish. If you'd be violating Leisachsim Shabbatishay, even if you don't actually muzzle it, just scream at it to stop it from eating, would that be a violation to get malkas of Leisachsim Shabbatishay? Now, continue on this theme. Talking about the Brisa. Someone muzzles an animal and he threshes with it. He violates the Ism Torah of Leisachsim Shabbatishay. The halacha is loika gets lashes for muzzling it, and the mashalim he has to pay to the owner of the animal, because again, if an animal is working for you and doing work, the animal has the rights, a monetary right, besides the prohibitory law, has monetary rights to be eating. You're not supposed to be muzzling him. So if you did muzzle him, you have to pay to the owner of the animal. Dalad kav and lapar, if it was a cow, 4 kav of food, and megimel kav and lachamar, and if it was a donkey, you have to pay 3 kav, because that's how the chacham evaluated how much a cow would have eaten and how much a donkey would have eaten. Says the Gemara, how could we understand the halacha the Brisa? But we know a klal, the halacha is you don't get lashes and get executed, and you don't get lashes and also make a monetary payment, because this is what's called shtei rishoyos, 2 incriminations, and the pasuk says in the Devarim Chavei, kedei shasai, in the singular, that when you do something wrong, the incrimination is only for one of the crimes. You don't get penalized for both. So how are you saying loiku mashalim? Abaya, he says, Hamani, who's the ton of this price? It's Remeiri. The Amma that he says in Mesech Makis on the Avdalim and Aleph, loiku mashalim, that you actually do get lashes and do pay. Where if a guy says, we testify in this guy that he owes his friend 200 zuz, and turns out that they were actually lying, and actually hazam is done to them. So not only do they have to pay the 200 zuz they tried to prosecute, which is what the Allah of Eidim Zayim is, what you tried to do, but they also get lashes for the false testimony. So you see that there is such an opinion, which takes to discuss at length to the validity of that point. But al kapanim, that's the halacha of Remeir, that yes, you could be like umashal. That's one approach. Another approach, as the Gemara, Rav Amri says, Esnan asner asr Torah. Now, although we're not talking about Esnan over here, but he's trying to bring out a point. Esnan is the halacha, if a person has relations with a harlot, that he's going to give the word Esnan is like of 10. He gives something to her as a payment for the services. So the Torah makes that forbidden to be brought as a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, which is explicit pasuk in the Torah. Now, that halacha is vafal afila ba'alimoy. Even if a man had relations, his mother was a harlot, and they hired her services, so to speak, and he gave her this gift, that if he gave her a lamb as an esnan, that would be quote unquote an esnan, and it would be forbidden to be brought as a carbon, because in the Torah it just says esnan is forbidden, which tries to discuss at greater length. But the way Rashi says it is, okay, it doesn't make a difference his mother, doesn't make a difference if it was a single girl, that it's payment for the services of a harlot, and it would be forbidden. Now, the point is like this: even if, let's say, the mother would take her son to court and say to the rabbanim, he says, "My son owes me an esnan. He owes me a lamb for the services that I provided to him." We would not obligate the son to give it to the mother. Why? Because of what's called kamle b'drabmine. Kamle b'drabmine is that you get this only the more severe punishment. Obviously, having relations with one mother is a chiyav misa. You're not going to have to give the monetary payment of the esnan. But when he does give it to her, it is an esnan. So what do you see from that? You see that even when there's the death penalty, even then there really is a monetary obligation on the son. We just don't have the power to punish him with both of them. Right, so Taisa says, right, Taisa says more than what Taisa says more the way you're saying it, but Rashi makes right. So that's Bezin, right? So that's the point. Rashi literally that's the words of Rashi right up to this point that Yidei Shemayim. That's what it means. There's a chiyuv, not b'dei adam. We cannot enforce. We can't. Rashi's words are we ain't koich la'anshe b'shnayim. But to fulfill your heavenly obligation, that you don't do until you literally pay. Because Rashi explains, he proves the point. He says, because if you would think to say that there is no monetary payment, there's no monetary obligation on this person that's getting already chiv misa, if he gives it to her, would it be quote unquote an esnan? It wouldn't be an esnan per se. It would be a matana ba'alma that he's giving her, because an esnan is only when you have this obligation for payment. There is no obligation. So then it wouldn't be an esnan. And then, so if that would be the case, then it shouldn't be forbidden to be brought as a carbon in the base of Mikdash. So obviously it has the title, it becomes an esnan. Oh, so what does esnan zayin have to do with our sugi over here? So by muzzling also, you owe the money to the owner of that cow. The courts just don't have the ability to punish you with both, because you're already getting punished, you're already getting lashes for leisachsim shabadisha, and you're not loike majalim. But since there really is a monetary obligation, you don't fulfill your obligation until you actually pay. So although we can't not enforce it, but you definitely owe that money. Or Rashi says another nafkamin would be what's called itafis, lemafkidiminei. We know certain halachas, let's say knasa b'bavel. We don't enforce that. We can't obligate the person. But if the guy grabs it to defend the claimant grabs it, we don't take it away from him. So it would be the same thing over here when we say loika mashalim. You're right, we're not going to enforce it. But if the guy grabs the money from the guy, says, you muzzled my cow, and he grabs it with the money, that we wouldn't take it away from him. So that's the second approach. I mean, the first approach of the Gemara was, yes, you're like Rameh holds loika mashalim. Second approach, Rabbi say, no loika mashalim. There's no meis to mashalim. Like by Esnan Zan, we get misa, but there is, we see that there's a monetary obligation over here. It just can't not be enforced, and therefore, that's where the halach of loika mashalim applies. A third approach, Papa, he says that no, actually, there is an obligation to pay, even in Bezdin. How's that possible? I thought you're not looking b'sham, because it's what's called in Talmudic terminology. It's not boyin ke'echad. It's not happening at the same time. So hence, it's not valid for what's called kedei rishasai. As the Gemara explains, mishas meshicha, the moment that you draw the animal from the owner of the cow to use it for your work, already that moment you're already obligated to feed the animal. The monetary obligation started the moment you took it from him. However, the lash is only when you actually put the muzzle on. That's not happening at the same time. That doesn't qualify for kedei rishasai. That's one thing. You think for the rest of your life now you did one avera that said you're not going to get obligated or punished for anything else? Of course you will be. So therefore, that's why you can be chayiv for the loika u'mashalim, because it's not happening at the same time. Now, continuing on the same Amora of Amar Papa, he says, Hani mili boy. These following things were asked from me, were by Debeira Papa Bar Abba. Now, by the Yeshiva Papa Bar Abba, they asked me the following two questions. Upashti luli surah. I paskined for them, I ruled for them, I resolved it for them that it's prohibited. But one was really what the halacha was, and one of them was actually not what the halacha was, but I still said that it was asur. What were these two questions? So when they asked me one question was, are you allowed to go ahead and make a dairy dough, to knead dough with milk? And I told them that is prohibited to make a dairy pastry. And that's halacha. It's kind of like learn the brisa. The halacha is ein loshen esa'isa b'chalav. You're not allowed to knead a dough with milk. V'em losh, if you did knead, you made a dairy dough. Kalapas kula asura. The whole bread is prohibited even to eat it by itself, let's say with what's called with salt. What's wrong with eating a dairy dough? The hergulav because it could bring about to sin, because people generally eat meat with bread, and you can have a loaf of bread, and you're not going to realize that it's dairy bread. So therefore, there's a prohibition about making dairy bread, because you might come to eat it with meat. Similarly, and again, we know there's other heterim, which if you make it look differently, whatever, or small size, whatever, but this is the ikra halacha, that one's not supposed to make a dairy dough. Similarly, you're not supposed to smear an oven with the fatty tail of the animal, because you want to have good schmaltz over there in the oven. And vimtash, if you did smear it, the whole bread that you baked over there is forbidden, until you go ahead and heat up the oven, because then you can have the problem the other way. The guy's going to have a cream cheese sandwich, and he has this this bread that would heat in the fleischiger oven, which Tosfos wonders why really do you have to actually heat up the oven and do like what's called koshering it. There should be enough to just wipe the oven clean, because this is what's called in halacha not bar nat. Not bar nat is that nat is nun tes, refers to the words nois and tam, bar nois and tam, which means to say when you cook fleischigs in the oven, you have the giving of the taste of the meat in the oven walls, and then now when you cook bread in the oven, it's giving of the taste of the oven walls into the bread. That's already, and that's still kosher. So if you can eat the bread with cheese, that should be permitted, because that's not bar nat. Somebody gave taste into somebody that's giving taste, it's already doesn't transfer any further. So Tosfos doesn't know why the halacha would be, as he brings the Gemara Chulin, that if you have fish that was in a fleischiger plate, you could eat it with a milchige dip for that same reason, because you had the meat on the plate. The plate got the taste of the meat. Now the taste of meat went into the fish, which the Gemara discussed over there, meat and fish. But let's say that's not a problem. And then the fish you could dip into the sour cream, because it's not by not. Akabam Tosfos has that question. No, but Tosfos just clean it. What if the koshering gets rid of the blias, gets rid of there's no absorbed taste anymore? You cook bread, it's a parva oven now. Might have to heat it up. They said just clean it. So it has the blias. No, even if, I'm saying even if it was hot, so it just has the taste of the meat in the oven walls. When you're going to cook bread in the oven, it's going to be you're just going to have a nice and tam, bar nice and tam. The bread's getting secondhand blias, meaning it's not getting straight. It's not like the blias of the meat went into the bread, and now you can eat the bread with cheese. It went from the meat into the oven wall, and oven wall into the bread. That's shari. That's permitted. That's not a problem to have with the other type. That's akaponim. That's one of the two teachings that he had regarding kneading bread with dairy. That he said it's usher, and that was really what the halach is. But there was another question they asked of me, which was, what's the halacha? Are you allowed to enter two different species, a male and a female of two different types of species of animals, to enter them ludir, into the pen, into the corral? Would that be considered like marbia climb, which the Torah says loy tarbia climb, that you're not allowed to mate different animals, or not? Is it only if you literally take the male organ of the one species and you insert that into the female, would only then be forbidden? So they asked me, what's the halacha? Can I put two of them into the same enclosed area? And I resolved with them. I said that it's prohibited, because I didn't want people to be disgraceful. And this comes up a lot where people in certain halachas are very lax, and it's incumbent upon Rabbanim to be more stringent for the reason of the fact that people are mezalzel with it. So to be lahagdir milsa, and that was love kilchasa. That's really not what the halach is. Actually, it's permitted. But he says no, it's aser. Damashmul Kishmul says that when it comes to copulating, so uvemena'afim, when people are testifying that they saw a man and a woman commit adultery, which would make them liable for death penalty or for lashes, the halach is achiro kederech hamenafim, that it requires you only if you see them the way people that commit adultery are acting. What does that mean? Meaning when they're laying near each other and they're moving about in the way that people would be committing adultery are doing, you don't have to have the witnesses to see literally, like what's called k'mikhil b'shveiferes, which is mikhail is like it's an applicator or like a wing or whatever it is that goes into the container, this narrow hollow container, which that's where you have the makeup inside of it, like take an eyeliner or whatever, or whichever one these are, and you take the makeup out and you put on the eye. So that would be a very graphic description of what it would mean that seeing the male mating with the female. So Rashi says very interesting words. He says, "Lo hiskikasan Torah l'stakol kalkach." The Torah didn't require the people to be looking so exacting, so graphic that to say, "Oh, I saw them." How do you know? How do you know they were mazana? Maybe they weren't. Right? What are you seeing? You saw very graphic. No, you don't have to. It's kederach menafim. If they're doing the act in the way people normally commit it, that would be that these people would be executed. Now, ubeklayim, regarding the prohibition about mating different animals, you're not liable at sheyachnis until you literally you insert with your hands the male organ into the female, the way people normally do if they want to, let's say, mate two animals of the same species. They're literally going to take the animals and insert it. That's the idea, that you're not violating the Isra of Klaim only if you literally go ahead and insert it. So when he answered to them that, no, you're not even put them into the same pen, that was like it's not true. The Isra of Klaim is only when you literally insert the male into the female. On that, the Gemara asks, Mosav Rav Achta bar Ami, he asks on Shmuel. We just quoted Shmuel's teaching as a way to reference to say what Rav Papa had paskin was really d'lahilchasa, but he did it lahagder milsa to make an offense against people that were being very lax in this isser. But Shmuel's teaching seems to be difficult for the following brisa. The brisa says, "Ilu nemar," had the pasuk said behem tochaloi tarbiyah, if it wouldn't have said the word klayim, the words of the pasuk are behem tochaloi tarbiyah klayim. Your animals, you shouldn't make them forbidden mixture of different species. Let's say it didn't say the word klayim. Let's just say behem tochaloi tarbiyah. Your animals shouldn't mate. He said, I would say that the pasuk is teaching you that lo yechayiz adam habehem, a person not allowed to hold on to an animal, let's say even with its horns, when the male is mounting on it, even if it's the same species, because you cannot be marbia your animals. You cannot have them. You cannot mate them. Tamalim Klein says no, a forbidden mixture. That's what the Brisa teaches. That it's only a problem to do this when they're not the same species. But the Gemara says lav machlal isn't the inference, but what you see is the klayim. But when they are different species, you see that achiza namiloi, that you can't even hold on to the animal's horn to hold it down to have the male mate it when it's a different species. But didn't you just tell me, Shmuel, that the prohibition of klayim is only if you literally take the male's organ and you insert it into the female? You see over here from the Brisa that even just holding on to the animal's horns would be a violation. I was like, no, my achiza, what do we mean by holding on? We mean achnasa. We mean literally inserting. But my kol achiza, why calling holding on? It's a euphemism. It's in Jewish teaching, we're very refined in the wording that we use. We don't use graphic words to describe things, and therefore it's just a appropriate terminology, but it means actual insertion, which is the way Shmuel said. Now, Amar Yehuda, in related teaching, says min b'minai, when they are from the same species, you're allowed to insert the male organ into the female's a concave, like the eye applicated into its container. And there's not even a problem about pretzis. This is where that word is from, of like a breach of modesty, because maybe a person might come to inappropriate thoughts. As the Gemara says, the person should not be gazing, looking at the nature channel, looking at donkeys mating or swine mating, or he's going to the farm. When they're mating and they're connecting one with the other. The Torah tells us, as the Gemara there elaborates from, the Shmartim called the Vara. Person should not be looking at these things. So the Chiddush is that no, my time, or what's the reason that there's no problem about actually inserting the male into the female? Because when did the Gemara in Avodah Zarah say it's a problem? It's when it's not your own animal. They don't need your help. So to be looking at these things are things that are illicit thoughts. But over here it's be'avidite target. Here, a guy's busy with his job. He's not thinking illicit thoughts. That's a heter b'chlal that comes up very often with doctors or different types of things. That the guy's busy with his job. He's not thinking about letting his mind wander off, which would be inappropriate to be gazing at these types of things. The chiddush is that a farmer, is allowed to go ahead and take the male and insert into the female. Now, Masav Rabachta Be'Barami, he asked what we mentioned before, that as we continue to Tamid Beis, that we said in the Brisa, Ilu Nemar, had the pasuk said Behem Techolei Tarbiyah, that your animal you shouldn't mate, let's say it didn't have the word Klayim. So the Brisa said, yeah, here you see, I would have said, Lo Yechaz Adam Es Behema, a person not allowed to hold down an animal, so that the male mounts it. Climb, teaches you, no, climb is when you can't do that. But okay, climb with the usher sounds like when is it prohibited? When it's different species. Hamin b'minay shari, but when it's the same species, okay, then it's going to be permitted. But it sounds like that even when the same species, only achiza in, only to hold it. But achnas Allah, you can't literally get so explicit and take the male organ and put it to the female. So no, my achiza, what does it mean holding? Hachnas, it means inserting. Why calling it holding? Lishnai, again, it's a refined terminology, but yes, a person is allowed to do that. Now, Amr Vashi, continue on what Rav Papa had paskined, that he said that you cannot have bringing in a male and female of two different types of species into the same pen. So Rav Vashi said, Hamilsa, this following teaching, Boyu Minoi, the Beir of Nechemya, Resh Galusa, in the yeshiva of Nechemya, who is the Resh Galusa, the head of all the diaspora, the minister of diaspora affairs, he asked for me the following. They asked for me the following question. His yeshiva, Ma'ala hachnes min uminoi v'shein min ladir. What's halacha? Could you bring in two of the same species and a third one that's not the same species? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. On the one hand, keeping the ikemine, since you have the same species, ubasim and egar. It's after that one that it's going to get pulled to, and therefore it's not a problem about creating the situation of climb. Maybe not, maybe even so, maybe not. Maybe we're still concerned about climb. You shouldn't have this couple with the third wheel over here as a possibility for climb. And I ruled for them, you know what? That it's prohibited, which again is the like kilchasa, because even min b'shein minoi is not even, meaning this a chiddush even further. Because because of the lax attitude of the slaves that were involved. The Resh Galusa had a lot of slaves, and we don't want to create a situation of inappropriateness, and therefore we want to stay far away from these types of elements. And therefore I said yes, even to have minu v'she'ena mina, even that will be awesome.
That's name 1 and 2. What about like when you have a robust farm and a lot of animals?
Right. The Gemara doesn't say that what exactly would be in that situation. That would be different, but the Gemara doesn't say. We continue with the halacha of the Mishnah of a worker that gets to eat, which is this halacha of like hiyavi b'kerem re'echa and of leisachim sharbedishay. So it says in the Mishnah like this, qualifying further this halacha. Let's say that a labor is done by the hands of a liberagl, but not with his feet. Or beragl of a libya with his feet, but not with his hands. Or a philibik seifai, even with his shoulder. I mean, he doesn't move his hands and his feet. His work just requires his shoulders. Either way, says the Tanna Kama, the worker gets to eat. He says no. It has to be work that requires hands and feet. Okay, so the Gemara explains this machlekes. My time, what's the reason of the Tanna Kama that holds it's any top part of your body? Because it says when you come into your friend's vineyard, which teaches whatever work you're going to do. Why would we think not? Why would it have to be hands, feet, head, shoulder, feet, nose, and toes? Whatever it's like, it could be anything. So then the Mishnah said, it says, no, until you do it with your hands and your feet. So what's the reason Rabbi Yehuda that requires hands and feet? Says because kishar. We already mentioned the previous daf that we made a hekesh between the chaysim and the nechsim. We said it was an extra word, shiur, b'dishay, because you want to be makish the shiur to the owner to say that the animal is similar to the human. So what do you see? What are you comparing the human worker to the animal worker? To teach you mashar, just like the animal worker. An ox itself, when it works, it uses 4 legs and its hind legs, hands and feet. So to the worker, it's only when he does with his hands and his feet, only then will this halacha apply that you have to let him eat from the food. Now this opens up a bunch of different questions. It says, if let's say a person is using geese or chickens to do the threshing. Now, these creatures don't have hands to lean on. All that they lean on are on their feet. So the Rabbi Yehuda, who says that we learn that from shiur, that you only get food when you use your hands and feet, what's the question? So they want to explain. I'll tell you what the question is. On the one hand, you say the reason why you have to use hands and feet is because you have to use all the force that the animal, that the person has inside of them, and that requires hands and feet. These creatures, the ducks, these geese that don't have hands, so you're getting b'chol koicha. I didn't know. Maybe no, maybe hands and feet, and you don't have that. Says Gemara, teku, let it stand. It's not clear what would the halacha be this situation. Which Taisa has an interesting conversation. The top Taisa that regarding this case of the geese and the chickens, that they're not using their wings because they can't thresh with their wings. So if you need b'chol koicha, then you have that. Or maybe you need to have yod b'raglov and you don't have that because they can't thresh with their wings. That was one approach. It's like regarding the wings themselves. Or you could say that no, even if they're threshing with their wings is a question, because it has to be literally done with a shiur, and it doesn't have hands like a shiur, and therefore that was the question that the Gemara was discussing, and the Gemara does not answer that question.
So go back to the Mishnah, a person has to work with his hands and feet.
Yeah.
Explain that.
So let's say where he's right. So let's say no, I don't think it has to be the same exact moment, like stomping, but the job has to require hands and feet. Right. So that's it sounds like. Right. It would sound like that just right. Not stationed, not sitting at a desk and just type. Oh, yeah. Right, but that's again according to one Tana. Now, Amr of Nachman Rabbi Bavua, he says that the way they used to do it, they would put the grapes on the wine press. They would step with their feet on the gas, which was this where the wine press was. So he says, Payalim, but regarding the workers, actually hilchu shasi v'erev begas, until they have gone crisscross in the wine press. So really, if they didn't do that yet, so their activity is not recognizable in the wine yet, because it didn't really press it so well. So you don't really see wine as an entity. You only see grapes as the work that he's doing. So therefore, they can eat the grapes. But they cannot drink the wine. Because if you drank wine, it would be like doing work with one type and eating with another type, which is not allowed to do. But once they already walked crisscross in the wine press, the length and the width, then it's already enough of wine has been pressed. Then it's like doing work with the wine. And then you could eat the grape and you could drink the wine. Now, continuing with the same theme in the next Mishnah, if let's say a guy was doing work with figs, so I'll eat from the grapes. If you're doing work with the grapes, you cannot eat from the figs. But what you could do is, you could hold yourself back until you get to a better place, and you could eat over there, whatever you want to eat from there, because now you're working over there. In other words, you don't have to be eating, proportionally to the work that you're doing. Now, regarding all these halachas, we didn't say that they could eat only during the moment when you're actually working. Not like you're sitting down and you're eating to say, okay, look, I held myself back up until now. I didn't stop to eat. Now I want to sit down and eat. No, you can't. It's only during the working itself. When you're working, you like throw a grape up into the air and you swallow one, you continue your plucking. Now, that's ikar halacha. But so to speak, like the halacha of Hashavas Aveda, to like return the loss that the owner would have, that, well, we don't want the guy to not really be so focused when he's working, because you tell me he could only be working and eating at the same time, it's going to be little shoddy job that he's doing. So Amr, they said, a worker could eat when he finished one row, and he's going now to the other row, even though that moment is not really shas malacha. The owner prefers that you eat then, because you're not doing any work at that time. So because of Shabbos Aveda, when you're going from one row to another one, or when you're on your way back from the press, that's when you could, that they prefer you eat then, and then even though it's not shas malacha, you're allowed to. And b'chamar, regarding a donkey, kashi padekes, when it's unloading, which Gemara is going to explain what does this actually mean. Now, I bother the following question. What happens if you're working on one grapevine? What's the halacha to eat in another grapevine? Meaning, can you cut a cluster of good grapes and go to the place that you're working and eat it over there? What's the question? So the Gemara says like this. Do you say, does it have to be from the same species that you're now currently working with and putting into the vessels of the employer? Where can you have that? No, maybe literally from the vine that you're putting in right now, that you need to have a halakha and that you don't have. Now the Gemara says, and if you're going to say, well, why would I ask such a question? Obviously, you would be allowed to eat. Why? Because if you're going to think to say, that if you're working on the grapevine, you cannot put into another grapevine, then how would I make sense? When the ox is working on something that's attached to the ground, which we already included from a comparison to the person, as the Gemara said on the Piches Mabez, that he's allowed to eat, how would the ox be allowed to eat? Meaning, if you tell me the ox is working on something that's attached to the ground, he cannot be eating from the grapevine that he's working on right now, because the yoke is attached to the ox in front of the wagon that's behind him. The ones who are harvesting the grapevine are near the wagon that's behind him. If it's behind him, the animal's eating what's in front of him. How would he be eating what's in front of him if there would be a different grapevine? Unless it's well, no, that wouldn't be a proof. Rav Sheshabri Davidi says that would be b'shracha. Could be a very long branch, which it's behind him where the workers are, but it's all the way leaning up in front of him. Okay, so that wouldn't be a raya. So what's the answer to this question? Could you eat from a different grapevine or not? Gemara says Tashmat being right from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, if a guy was working with figs, he cannot be eating from the grapes. Now, it sounds like the dig would be but figs and figs, similar to figs and grapes. Meaning, if you're working on one fig tree and you're eating from another fig tree, sounds like you'd be allowed to eat. Wait a second. If you're going to say, if you're working on one grapevine, you cannot eat from another grapevine. Well, how would this be? You're telling me only when it's two different things. Sounds like when it's the same species, even though it's two different things, that then it would be permitted. But I thought you're not allowed to have from one grapevine to another one. Obviously that you are allowed to. Says, no, it's not a raya. Amar Sheshbri Davidi. He said, the truth is, no. Maybe I could tell you need both. It has to be from the same species. It has to be literally from the thing that you're working on right now. So then why do I have to tell you figs and grapes? Isn't the inference then, but figs and figs, even though they're different trees, you're allowed to eat? No, we're talking about b'mudles. We're talking about where that the fig tree is leaning over the grapevine, or the grapevine is hanging over the fig tree. And what we're telling you is, if you're working on one species, you're not allowed to eat from the other species, even though you're busy with both of them, because you have to lift up one to separate the branches of this one from the other one when you're cutting it off. However, but it's not from the species that you're putting into the bowls right now. Oh, but figs and figs, that's similar to that type of a case, which one is leaning on the other one, then you don't have to differentiate which one you're eating from, because from the one that you're putting in right now and the one that you're not are the same thing. You're busy with both of them. And therefore, that's where we would be allowed to. But if it's a totally different tree, maybe it would not be permitted. The Gemara says, I could touch him, I'll try to bring a raya from another halacha in our Mishnah. We said, but the guy could hold himself back. The marshmallow study. Right? Who's the smart people? They don't eat right away. They hold themselves back for the better tree. That you're allowed to do. Now, but if you're going to say, that if you're working on one grapevine, you're allowed to eat from another grapevine. So what's the chiddush? What do you mean you hold yourself back? What do you mean? Nasal v'neisev. Why do you have to wait till you get there? Who has to be patient? We're all impatient. Go there, bring it back, and eat. Where you're working right now. Why do you have to hold yourself back? You're allowed to take from a different one when you're working on the different one. Says Gemara, no. The reason why over there you cannot do that, and you have to hold yourself back, is hasam mishum bitul malacha. That's simply because of the wasted time of working that it's going to take when you walk from one to the other one. That's why, like that wasn't a question. That's why we said it's usher. The question we had was, it's a whole family chalamoy trip. They're seeing Tati work over there. Is a bring your kids to work day, where they're not hired out by the employer, and they're there. What's the halacha? Could they bring him? He's not wasting any time from work. Could his wife and kids bring from the other one for him to eat? That was our question. So the Gemara said, okay, Tashma, let's bring another raya from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, we didn't say we're going to all these cases that the worker is allowed to eat, only during the time of work itself. That's ikar halacha. But because we want to return the loss, that potential loss to the owner, they said that the workers are allowed to eat when they're going from one row to another row, and when they're on their way back from the water cooler. From the wine press. That's when you're allowed to go ahead and eat then. Now, Savru, the Rabbanan of the Beis Medrash, who wanted to resolve our question from here, they thought the following idea: that mahalach, when a worker is walking for the requirements of the employer, like over here when he's going from one row to another row, it's like he's doing actual work right now. His walking is working, and he should be allowed to eat. Wait a second. And even so, what you see from the Mishnah is, it's only mishum hashav l'baylim hodachal. It's only because it's a potential loss, because it's wasted time. Might as well be eating while you're walking. So if not for the Rabbanan instituting this, because the employer is pleased with this, sounds like that biblically you would not be allowed to eat. Why not? Because when you're walking for the purposes of the grapevine that you're going to. That would mean you're eating, however, is from the grapes that you just came from, that you cut from. Well, Alma, so you see that you see that when you're working on one, you're not eating from the other one, because you see that even though it's, so to speak, when you're walking, but you're for the one you're going to, you'd be eating the grapes from the one that you came from. That's gefen zeb megefen acher. That you're not do. Says Gemara, no, it's not a raya. Truth, I could tell you, if you're working on one grapevine, you could eat from another grapevine. Because the mahalach lav, it's not true the premise that we made. When you're walking, it's not like you're doing work. Oh, that's why, if not for hashavas aveda, you wouldn't be allowed to eat. Because simply you're not doing work right now. You only could eat when you're doing work. Okay, Rabban instituted that the employer is pleased, that's why you're allowed to. So it's no raya. That's one version. Those that say, Sabru, they thought the other way around. They thought, mahalach lav, no, when you're walking from one road to another one, it's not like you're doing work. Behind the time and the reason why is because biblically you're not allowed to eat mishum delav because you're not doing work. But the inference would be ha'oisa maisa. But if let's say you would be doing work, for example, let's say carrying something on your shoulder as you're going from one row to another row, then it would sound like acham midaraisa. Then biblically you would be allowed to eat. You see, when you're working one grapevine, you could eat from another grapevine, because when you're walking to the other one, you're doing other work. You could still be eating from the old one. You see that you're allowed to. And that the Gemara says, no, the oil machal truth, I could tell you, again, this is the opposite version of the first version. I can tell you that, no, you cannot eat from another grapevine, because it gets into Tzad Beis Amin Aleph, so it depends which way the Gemara was switching to say which one was the attempted raya, and that the Gemara is saying, no, could be that when you're walking, it is like doing work. And even so, if not for Hashavas Aved, you wouldn't be able to eat, because you're actually not allowed to eat from another one, even though you're middle of doing work itself. Now, the last halacha of the Mishnah was, regarding a donkey, kisheperakis, when it's unloading. Said the Gemara, kisheperakis, when it's unloaded, nechan achla, where is it eating from? Because the whole load you unload at one time and then you just leave. So what does it mean it's eating when you unload it? So Amos says the Gemara, no, meaning the donkey can eat from the load until it's unloaded. Meaning when the animal's walking, it could eat from the load that's on top of it, which Taisus on the top says, what's the chiddush in that? You would have thought to say the animal cannot eat only when it sees the grapevine in front of it, like it's on the plantation. When it doesn't see anything, it just happens to be a grapevine on the top of it or on the wagon, it should not be able to eat, because even though the reason of muzzling is not because seeing and being in pain, which it doesn't see it, and it's not, so still that's the chiddush that the animal gets to eat. That's what we're saying until it gets unloaded. Which this supports what we learned in the Brisa, Chamor v'gamal, a donkey and a camel. They could eat from the loads that are on top of them. As long as you don't actually take it by hand and feed them, but they themselves, the animal's owner may not feed it by hand, but while it's traveling until it's unloaded, the animal could go ahead and eat from what's on top of it. Thank you to any time.